Hello, and welcome to another edition of Critical Q&A, the show where I answer your questions based on what you have sent me by email at askchrisshelton@gmail.com or have left for me in the comment section of my Q&A videos. Okay, if you email them to me at that email address or leave them in the comments here, I will probably get them and put them into my question queue. If you tweet them at me, send them to me through Facebook messages or otherwise send them to me. Maybe not. Okay. Really happy to be here. Very happy to have you invite me into your home or life again this week for some answers. And I wanted to put a quick plug in for the podcast. Sensibly Speaking podcast we did this week. It was me and Cyprian Ivanov talking about the Dana Masterson case because that is happening this next week. It's happening in a couple days from as I sit here recording this. That trial is starting. And it's going to take a few weeks. I think we're going to have a few probably reaction type live streams or communications to you guys from this channel about the case as it's rolling out. I will definitely be following it as closely as I can, along with everybody else in the Scientology watching world. So you guys can watch for that as well. But I hope you will enjoy that podcast we did yesterday. All right, enough of this. Let's get on with your questions. Ray Sutherland, knowing you were there when LRH was alive, and obviously after when David Miscavige took over, when did you really start to question the ethics of Scientology? Was it the sudden change in leadership style and direction that caused you to question your time in Scientology? It seems you were all in earlier, and then you became really concerned after David Miscavige took over. Do you think you would have remained a Scientologist if LRH were still alive and running the show? Thanks for this question, Ray. So first off, I was not really concerned when David Miscavige took over because I didn't really know David Miscavige or know anything about the church hierarchy or structure or how the power was distributed through the organization back when Miscavige took over back in 1987. I was just a new public person doing services at the Santa Barbara church. And so we would hear or see various things. I remember an issue when L. Ron Hubbard died. There was an event held at the Palladium in Hollywood, and David Miscavige was the MC of that event, and I did see some of that. Then there was an issue that came out very soon after that basically declared or got rid of Pat and Annie Broker and said they had tried to do a power play and take over. Well, this was posted on the notice board for the public to read in Santa Barbara, and I saw that and kind of shrugged. I was like, "Oh, well, that doesn't sound good." But I was 17 years, I really didn't 16 years old. I didn't really care much about any of that. David Miscavige was just a name on a piece of paper to me and some guy in a video. Scientology was much more immediately something that I was trying to use in my own life to get dates and get along better with people in high school. So I was not at all concerned about any of it at that time. Now, fast forward a few years, I joined staff in Santa Barbara. I start working there. And there was an incident I described a few weeks ago, I think, on this show where RTC came to Santa Barbara org because of me. A couple of Religious Technology Center staff members, and RTC is the organization, the subunit that David Miscavige is directly in charge of. And back then, he was in charge of it. And this was in the early 90s that this happened. So I've been on staff for a few years now, and he had sent down an order, a technical order, that all the technical staff, anybody who used an e-meter, in other words, had to redo some training steps to use the e-meter because everybody was doing something very, very wrong in how they were applying the e-meter in auditing, word clearing, whatever. And I disagreed with this. I thought this was nonsense, and I didn't think I had a problem with it. And so I sent up what's called an orders query, where if you receive an order and you don't feel it's correct, you can query the order per policy in Scientology, and you can provide the information as to why it's incorrect and send it back to the issuer and ask that it be rescinded. Well, the response from RTC was to send two RTC staff down to Santa Barbara to put me on an e-meter and straighten me out and straighten out my non-compliance and that sort of thing. That was probably the very first hint that something might not be right around here. But of course, I let that pass and took my beatings, and not literal beatings, but kinda. I mean, it was pretty rough. They were not nice to me, and that was not a pleasant visit or cordial, I guess I could say. They were pissed, and they were pissed that I dared to question David Miscavige on anything for any reason. So that didn't go over so well. But like I said, that kind of happened. I kept going, and in fact, a couple years later, after that, in 1995, I joined the Sea Organization myself, and did that because I felt it was my duty. I felt it was something I needed to do because Scientology in Santa Barbara clearly wasn't going to take off, and nothing I was going to do there was going to make that change. It was just a podunk place, and it was going to stay a podunk place. And after working there for 8 years, I was sick of it. So I decided, well, I need to move up to the big leagues. I need to come out of the farm leagues and get to the big game, right? Get out of the minors. And so I went all in. So clearly I was nervous about that. I was very, very I didn't do it because I wanted the Sea Org lifestyle. I knew that Sea Org members had it rough. I didn't know how rough. I had no idea how rough, but I knew already things could get bad. And I knew about this thing called the RPF, this prison detail that people could go to. And I knew that was rough. And I felt, though, that I probably wasn't going to end up there, and I wasn't going to get in that much trouble because I'm a hard worker and I'm a good worker and I have good intentions, and I want Scientology to succeed. And so let's go do this thing, and I joined the Sea Org. So I immediately go into Scientology management, and I am managing the technical delivery, the courses and the auditing delivery over the entire Western United States. And now I'm in a whole new world of insanity called the Sea Organization, where it's work, 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 and don't think, just do, and get it done and make it go right, and taka, 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 and let's move. So the speed with which my life was operating suddenly went into overdrive, and the amount of thinking I could do about what was going on, kind of the reverse ratio, right? Okay, so it took a few years for me to get acclimated to the Sea Org environment in PAC in Los Angeles, and to my job, and to understand and kind of get on top of all of the different delivery points and all the things that were going on in Scientology in the Western United States. That's the management zone that I was in. And it was a real struggle all the time to just deal with the barrage of orders and emergencies and directions and urgent, drop everything right now, it has to be done. And then an hour later, you got some other priority. And then 2 days later, some other priority. And, after years of that, you finally get enough quiet moments that you start looking around and going, this is crazy. Why is this being run this way? It doesn't have to be like this. We could get things done without all this yelling and screaming. We could get things done without all this intense pressure on us all the time. It started dawning on me after about 3 or 4 years of management work in the Sea Org that this environment was kind of a created environment of urgency and madness and I started kind of, this is not right. But again, it wasn't so not right that I wanted to leave or I wanted to, get out of here, but it was wrong enough that it was so counterproductive. It was so obviously counterproductive. And that was very frustrating. I guess you could say I was extremely frustrated at this point. And there had been a number of instances of physical punishments and disciplinary actions and ethics justice actions and yelling and screaming and stuff that I was also in a place of fear all the time. I mean, it was a weird juxtaposition of attitudes because I believed I was part of the only movement in the world, in the universe really, that was doing something effective about the conditions on planet Earth and about the conditions and problems of mankind. I really believe that. And yet at the same time, I believed and saw and was part of a system that was whack. It was absolutely nuts trying to work there and get anything done. And this was a real clash. These two things really clashed for me in big and small ways. So there were lots of little, for these frustration points and these points of like, something's really wrong here. But it wasn't really, all this built up to the San Diego project. And this was something I think around 2003 or 4. Went down to San Diego. I think it was in 2003. Went down there to get auditors. Did a 3-week stint down there. Got a bunch of auditors, recruited staff for San Diego org. It was an impossible target, and we did it. We had to get like 20 auditors in like 3 weeks, and we did. It was quite amazing. And the San Diego staff really rallied behind the cause, and they're the ones who did most of the work. And I was kind of egging them on and directing things. And it was amazing. It was this amazing project. I've talked about it before. And I came back to Los Angeles, and it was ho-hum, big deal, who cares? And all the things you did down there that were so successful that could be done in other organizations were dropped like a hot potato. No, we're not doing that. No, we're not going to do that. You just need to keep sending telexes to them and telling them to play the birthday game, and everything will be great. And I knew for a fact, after all those years in Scientology as a staff member and then as a Sea Org member, that was complete and utter bullshit. And that actually the organization I was part of, the management unit that I was part of, and the entire management structure, which of course now I totally understood, that it was just off the rails. That whatever this group thought it was doing and told itself it was doing is not what it was doing. We were not managing organizations. We were screaming and yelling at them. We were not expanding Scientology. We were shrinking it. We were not doing the things that need to be done in order to expand Scientology. We were doing the exact opposite and patting ourselves on the back and calling ourselves managers and executives when we didn't deserve any part of either of those titles. And it was really just kind of this insane whirlwind of nonsense and this sort of, this hamster wheel to nowhere. You could run and run and run and run and run all day long, and you're getting nowhere. And the San Diego project really clarified that for me like nothing else had. It was so bluntly obvious that what we were doing was not expanding the orgs. I go down for 3 weeks. I expand an organization in a very significant way in a very short period of time. I realize this same thing could be done in every other organization we've got. Proceed to try to do that, get my, head slapped, and get put back in my place and told, you're the one who's out of step. You're the one who's not doing things right here. You're the one who's not on source. You're the one who's not applying what LRH says to apply. And I went, you know what? Fuck all of you. That is total fucking bullshit. I just did an amazing thing and I'm getting punished for it, right? So, and nobody else wanted to step up and stand up for what I had done or back up or support me in any way. Everybody just went along with what was coming down from the top, which was ignore Shelton's orders and just push the birthday game. And I just can't even begin to describe to you the level of betrayal that created in me, because I saw so clearly then, oh, we're not about expanding orgs. We're about busy work. That's what all this is about. It's just busy work. We're just spinning our wheels all day for no good reason. We're not producing a goddamn thing. Oh, that's what's going on here, right? And once that was like so obvious it couldn't be denied, I didn't want to really have a whole lot to do with management after that. And shortly thereafter, enough things, other things clicked into place. The whole ideal org thing came down, and I thought that was going to be amazing, only to watch it be implemented in San Francisco, which is the West US. Since I was still managing West US, the first ideal org for the West US was San Francisco. And I watched that happen, and I watched what it took to make that happen and how it was executed, where people were sent up there for months. Practically the entire management structure was emptied out, and a bunch of people were sent up to San Francisco to do 24/7 renovations. I was left behind to run the show with a skeleton crew and had to get all the work done of all these people who were suddenly gone. And I couldn't keep up, of course, and things were tanking, and it was awful. And I was being blamed for that, et cetera, because we were supposed to make it go right. And I watched this thing happen up in San Francisco, and I went, this is how this is going to go? Like, we get this amazing briefing from Miscavige about how everything's going to be different, and we're going to be focusing on these organizations. We're going to be expanding them. It's going to be sane. It's going to be rational. We're going to have Division 6s, the public-facing divisions. They're going to have the doors open. We're going to have a lot of staff there. We're going to bring people in. We're going to show them what Scientology is. It's going to be amazing. They're going to be delighted by the quality of the buildings. And it's the buildings are finally going to reflect the quality of the technology of Scientology. And it was this big preached, this great big event where Miscavige went on for 3 hours about how amazing all of this was going to be. And I bought into it because I was just so desperate for some hope after all these years of hopelessness. And then to watch how it was executed, it was the same shit another day. It was just the same crap. And I was like, fuck this management crap. I want to contribute to Scientology. I want to make the world a better place. I think this is the way to do it, but not this. This is not what I want to be part of. And so shortly thereafter, I took off for a few days, got myself out of management because they didn't appreciate me leaving in the middle of the night for 3 days going AWOL. Came back, sorted it out, got back into production on an entirely different organization, left management behind. And a year after that, I was on the RPF. So it was kind of this, and that was pretty much that whole thing I've just kind of told you about, that period of time. That was the true beginning of the end for me. And it was another, getting through the RPF, going out and doing recruitment projects and doing other stuff. It was another 10 years of work before I finally got up the guts to go, I want out. This is just not working out for me. And that's the whole story. So there you go. Hope that, yeah. And then you also asked, do you think you would have remained a Scientologist if LRH was still alive? No, because the shit show that is Scientology was run the same way under Hubbard. I mean, it wasn't like things were so much better when he was running the show. Miscavige, most of his ideas came directly from L. Ron Hubbard. So no, I would have probably persisted longer in certain ways had Hubbard still been around. I probably would have tried to reach out to him a few times or something, or, who knows what would have been different. But, because everything would have been different if Hubbard had actually been running things longer. Not better, different. I mean, Hubbard, let's remember, at the last 10, 15 years of Hubbard's life, he was absolutely batshit crazy. I mean, he lost every plot. And he just went completely paranoid, delusional, megalomaniac nutcase. That's L. Ron Hubbard in the last 15, 20 years of his life. And that was the significant portion of the time he ran the Sea Org, managed Scientology, et cetera, right? Managed it right into the ground. So he almost destroyed it in the end. And it was really only because of the work of an awful lot of people, very sincere, dedicated people, that they were able to save Scientology despite L. Ron Hubbard's bullshit and despite David Miscavige's bullshit. And those guys are all gone now. And the people who were there running the show are pathetic. They're just a bunch of pathetic people trying to keep up with Miscavige's insane demands. And that sort of thing, doesn't have longevity. It hasn't had longevity. And that's why Scientology has been crashing ever since Miscavige tried, to implement his own ideas, which were batshit stupid, crazy. And he's taken it right over a cliff. I mean, it's let's just to talk turkey about this for a second, just get really, really honest about this, right? Scientology does not have any future. It's on its way out and it's going to die. whether David Miscavige dies or not, or somebody else takes over, Tom Cruise takes over, which is, please, please, please stop saying that. Please. Tom Cruise is not taking over Scientology. But whoever takes it over, it's a hopeless cause. The product isn't a product. It's what they're selling is bad for people. What they're doing is bad for people. And they're losing people hand over fist. So anyway, just kind of ranting a little bit there. But no, LRH, if he had been alive and running the show, I still would be out, I think, by this point. I think I already took 20 years too long getting out as it was. Maybe if Hubbard had kept running the show, I actually would have gotten out earlier. Lots of things are possible. So anyway, there you go. Sam Leaptrot. I was wondering if you would be willing to share your thoughts about frequency bias. There are some times when I'm watching a video or TV show and I'm thinking about something seemingly unrelated to the content when something in that video or show mentions almost exactly what I am thinking. For example, I was watching a live stream of a YouTuber discussing politics, but I was thinking about working out and how I wished that I was seeing more visible gains from my work. The YouTuber then mentioned very soon after about how they were working out and that they feel stronger, but they aren't seeing the results of it. There are a lot of moments in my life where I have these experiences that make me go, wow, I was just thinking that exact same thing. That's crazy. I was wondering if you had thoughts about this type of bias that is seemingly hard to avoid at times. I don't have a background in psychological studies at all, but it almost seems to me like there are little cues that people can give out through their speech that can provoke a thought that maybe causes this phenomenon. How much do you feel like people play on that bias people have and use it to their advantage? Okay, frequency bias. Let's go ahead and define this. And of course, our wonderful Wikipedia has a great summary of this. So let's go over it real fast. It's called frequency illusion. It's also called the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, and it's, of course, referred to also as frequency bias. And it's a cognitive bias. In other words, it's something that we do that is sort of like a lens or a filtering thing that we do with our mind, where after noticing something for the first time, there's a tendency to notice it again more often, leading someone to believe that it has an increased frequency or occurrence. That just because you notice it more, suddenly you think, oh, there's more of it. When the fact of the matter is, it was always there. And it was always there in the same numbers it's there now, but you're just noticing it. And so now it's a new and significant thing for you. And the breakdown of this, how this actually works, is it was Arnold Zwicky, a professor of linguistics at Stanford, considered this illusion a process involving two cognitive biases: selective attention bias, which is noticing things that are important to us and disregarding the rest. That's just something we do. If something's important, we see it more quickly than things that are not important to us. Followed by confirmation bias, which is looking for things that support our hypothesis while disregarding potential counter evidence. So between these two things of noticing things that you think are important and reinforcing or holding on to things that you think are true or real and disregarding things that might counter or tell you that's not true or not real or not important, between those two things, you get this frequency bias phenomenon. It's very interesting. Like, for example, as a kid, I built a model of a particular kind of Ford car, and suddenly I was seeing that Ford car everywhere on the road. Well, I guarantee you that car did not just appear one day because I built a model of it and suddenly there were more of them. That's not at all what happened. What happened was I was more aware of it, and so I started noticing it in the environment. Mostly that selective attention bias. But then the confirmation bias then goes, oh, wow, well, there must be more. Oh, there's another one. Oh, wow, there's another one. Maybe there are more of these in the world now. I mean, we've all, I think, run into that in one way or another. So that's frequency bias as terms of what it is. And it really is an illusion. It's not a real thing. It's just because you notice something more often doesn't mean it's there more often. You have to take other steps to confirm that kind of thing, not just noticing something or because you have an opinion about it, therefore it must be that way. And this is one of those tricks of perception and memory and that kind of thing that we all get into. And some people more than others, if they have, weak discipline in terms of being critical thinkers, then they might, attribute this to some new reality that they're living in. In other words, they might think, oh no, it's absolutely true that, no, more of these Ford cars are being made, or. And here's some ways that this gets utilized to fool you or screw around with people, right? So let me go to Scientology to give some examples. Past life memories or telepathic communication. Oh yeah, this gets used in Scientology all the time, right? Oh, I was just thinking about, blah. I was too. We must be on the same wavelength. Guys would use this all the time in Scientology to pick up women, by the way. All the time. Oh, wow, look, we're clicking. We're together. We're on the same frequency, right? We're on the same wavelength is how they would say it in Scientology. Or we must be spiritually aligned or connected, or maybe we knew each other in a past life. Like all these inferences start being made because of simple coincidental connections in thinking, right? Oh, I was just thinking about the Broncos. Oh, yeah, me too. I love the Broncos. I was just thinking about them too. And both of them have completely forgotten that they were standing in a room where 3 minutes ago somebody mentioned something about football or the Broncos. Just a casual remark. These two weren't even involved in the conversation, but suddenly their mind goes to football and Broncos, and one of them says something, and everyone goes, oh, yeah. Like, that's how it actually happens more often than not, is there's some, as you mentioned in the question, there's some trigger or there's some incident or there's something that happens, and it gets your thoughts going in a certain direction, and it gets another person's thought, and then you compare notes, and there you go. I don't feel like I'm as explaining this as clearly as I'd like to, but this is all just kind of off the top of my head. Another way that you will see this, psychic readings. Okay, you see, this is used by people who believe in astrology or psychics or ESP and paranormal phenomena. Is they will have coincidences happen to them, right? Oh, I was just thinking about blah, and there it is. Oh, I was just having a talk with somebody, and there's this, right? Kind of thing. Anyway, you get the idea. This pops up all over the place. And depending on how, and the bottom line is, depending on how disciplined you are as a thinker, as a critical thinker, is going to determine how often you fall for this nonsense, right? You fall for this bias because it is an illusion. But people use it to confirm for themselves that telepathy is real, spirituality is real, astrology is real, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so there you go. Mark P. Shortly after OT3 was released, Hubbard created the Class 8 course. Part of that course was about getting standard tech in at all levels. Another part was about fixing cases for those struggling on the OT levels. As time went by, more info was released that added on to Class 8. At some point in the mid-1970s, the Class 9 level was created by rolling back the Class 8 to the original material that was created on Flag when Hubbard did the first course. The newer material then became the Class 9 course. Fast forward to more recent times, somewhere I ran across something that described Class 8 and 9 very differently. How do these two levels get applied today? Okay, thank you for this question. We're going to dig into some Scientology minutia here with this because we're talking about advanced auditor training levels. The Class 8 course is the highest auditor training class that a public Scientologist or a Scientology staff member can attain. The auditor training levels go all the way up to class 12, but the public and the staff can only do up to class 8. Class 9, 10, 11, and 12 are only for Sea Org members to do. And they are to deliver specific services that only the Sea Org can deliver. So the Class 8 course is the ultimate in auditor training for any Scientologist. It is the supposed to be this, as you mentioned, this culmination of standard tech, which is Hubbard's way or phrase for the one exact right way to apply Scientology. That's what standard tech means. And a Class 8 is supposed to be a specialist in standard tech, the basics of auditing, the techniques of auditing, the techniques of Scientology are reviewed and reviewed and reviewed until a person is just kind of perfect at them at that level. It's a short course, actually, but it's, I think, like 3 weeks or something. But it's rigorous, it's tough, et cetera, et cetera. And Hubbard was incredibly abusive in delivering that course to people on the ship back in the day when he first released it. Now, the idea of Class 8 is not just to be this, sort of fantastic butterfly of an auditor who's perfect in everything. But the techniques that are taught on the Class 8 course have to do with auditing and then also auditing repairs or what are called reviews of OT level up to OT level 3 and 4. So if you need to get fixed up on something and you're auditing and you're on OT3 and you screw up or something and you're so bad off, you get sick or you have some problem or you don't want to do it anymore or something, they will hook you up with a Class 8 auditor who will fix you using special Class 8 techniques. And that's what the Class 8 course is all about. The Class 9 course is the course that teaches an auditor how to deliver OT level 5. I believe Class 8 is OT 3 and 4, and I believe that the OT level 5 you learn on the Class 9 course. Okay, so that's it. That's the differentiation. And so now, by the way, the Class 9 course can be done. You don't even have to do Class 6, 7, or 8 to do Class 9. You can leap ahead. You can get up to what's called a Class 5 auditor, Grad 5 auditor, and then you can jump ahead to Class 9 and learn how to deliver OT level 5. But such a person would not be qualified to deliver those repairs, as far as I know, to the OT3 still. I'm not, as far as I understand it. Again, this is all super, super, super Scientology minutia. No one really, definitely a good question mark, and that is the answer I have for you, but not super broadly applicable information, unfortunately. But there you go. I hope that was helpful. Michael Yoder. LRH talked about present time problems, which I believe means what's going on in your life right now. And randomity. Can you clarify randomity? Also, LRH seems to lay a huge amount of blame on auditors for anything going on with PCs. Was that common in your experience? Okay, Michael, thank you for this question. Again, we're going to dive into some Scientology terminology here. So first off, randomity, the coined word in Scientology, and it doesn't just mean random stuff. It's actually very specific. It means the amount of predicted and unpredicted motion a person has in ratio. He likes 50-50. Okay, now if that doesn't make any sense, let me explain. Hubbard used the word randomity to describe how much chaos or order a person needs in their life. How much can they deal with random stuff happening to them or around them or with them versus ordered things. Okay, so you have the amount of predicted and unpredicted motion. Okay, so if you're in a room and you're sitting at a desk doing your job, let's say you're at the office, and you've got everything set a particular way, you've got certain jobs that you got to do or tasks you have to perform. Maybe you list these out, maybe you keep it in your head, and you do your work. And we've all experienced that moment when the boss comes in or some coworker comes in and just dumps a bunch of crap on you that you didn't see coming, didn't have any prediction was going to happen, sudden emergency, let's say, or something like that. And you suddenly start feeling overwhelmed. Oh, fuck, this is too much. I can't do all this and get this done. I was barely treading water as it is, or whatever. You've got too much randomity in your life. All of a sudden, the randomity factor has come way up. And in Scientology, they would say you are suffering from plus randomity. You got too much. Then there's minus randomity. You don't have enough. You're bored out of your mind, right? Everything is completely predictable. Everything's totally set. And everything's under beautiful control. You're suffering from now minus randomity. You don't have enough unpredicted stuff going on in your life to keep it interesting. So that's how randomity is used in Scientology. It's not a very commonly used word. It's fairly, but not super common. Okay, now you also asked here about blaming auditors for what's going on with PCs. Okay, so in Scientology, auditors are the ones who are running auditing sessions. They control everything that goes on in the auditing. The pre-clear, or PC, is the person who's receiving the auditing. And auditors are held 100% responsible for every single thing that happens in the session. Every error, every mistake, every win, gain, it's all on them. Ultimately, Hubbard is the source of all the gains in Scientology. That much is made crystal clear in Scientology. But if the auditor does a bad job or doesn't do a stellar job, it's on him. And the results that he gets are on him. Because the assumption, and it's a completely unwarranted assumption, but the assumption is that Scientology works 100% of the time if it's applied standardly. So if the auditor applies the text standardly to a pre-clear, he will always get the same stellar result session after session after session, which of course ignores the fact that people are people. Remember, I've said before, the pre-clear, the person who's receiving the auditing, is the least important part of what's going on in the auditing room. No one cares what the PC says or thinks. He's only there, the auditor is there, to get the pre-clear through the process. And it's assumed, again, in a very unwarranted fashion, that the processes and the techniques and the methods of Scientology work, and they work every time. So we don't have to worry about whether the pre-clear is going to have a good result. You just do the process on him and he'll have a good result. That's the faith of the auditing session. And it's a false faith. It's a fake assumption. So it's not true. But it is how Scientology conducts itself. And so if there's a bad result, auditors are to blame for that. And that's how that works. Tyler Simmons. I have seen a few people saying that society is falling apart because parents are too soft and don't discipline their children, and that we coddle them too much. I have a huge problem with such a notion. I don't want to go back to those days where beating a child is the norm. What do you think? Tyler, I think this is a great question, and it is a very complicated subject because people are people, and kids are kids, and they come in all shapes, sizes, attitudes, and emotional states. And so what we're missing, as far as I can tell, my take on all of this is not that it's a bad thing to discipline a child. It's a bad thing to beat on a kid. But I'm not using the word discipline as a euphemism for hitting your kid. I'm talking about discipline. I mean, instilling discipline in their life, right? There are rules, there are orders, there's guidance, there's path, there's guidelines, there's edges on this highway, that you have to follow. And every kid is different. Every human being is different. And somehow we have a real problem with a number of problems. One of them being, one of the biggest ones as I see it in terms of child rearing and society falling apart or whatever, is that there are too many parents who just don't want their kids in the first place. And if you don't want kids, you shouldn't be having them. and forcing people to have kids. And this is one of my biggest problems with the whole abortion issue, is you're forcing somebody to have a child who doesn't want one. What do you think? What are you thinking? If a parent doesn't want a child, it is almost guaranteed that that child is going to be abused. It's just not right. People shouldn't have to be forced to have children. The reason I'm so vigorous and emphatic about this is because of the amount of work it takes to raise a child. It's nothing to beat a child into submission. That's not raising a child. That's child abuse. It's easy to do. It's, in fact, the easiest route through an unwanted childhood is for the parents to just beat the kid until they shut the hell up and don't bother them. And if you have parents who treat their kids like that, and we have millions of parents who treat their kids like that, you're setting up the future generations for complete failure. You're setting that child up for failure before they've even had a chance to start. Children matter, and what happens to children, especially in their youngest years, matters a lot to their future development and their future activity. And if you beat on kids, if you treat them badly, you're setting them up for failure. There are biological reasons for this. There's cultural reasons for this, psychological reasons for this. There's a number of disciplines that have approached this problem and come up with the fact that that's not how to do it. So does that mean then that we pendulum swing over to complete lawlessness and no rules, no guidelines, no discipline? You know, if I can't beat my kid into submission, what? It's just nothing then? And it's like, that's what I'm talking about with bad parenting, is like they can't even conceive of the idea that their child is actually a human being. A child is not a blank slate for you to write your wills and your goals and your intentions on. A child is an independent entity. They got their own ideas about what they want to do, what direction they want to go in, and how they should conduct their life. Your job as a parent is to support them, raise them, teach them, keep them safe, and build them up into a productive human being who can go out in society and do something positive. Your job as a parent is not to make them into little versions of you, or to treat them like they are a possession of yours, or you own them and they're your property and you get to do whatever you want to with them. You know, if somebody did that to you, you'd murder them. But your child has to put up with it because you're a jerk, right? I mean, that's how that goes. So I say you in this general sense, right? But so we don't want the child beating and the nonsense, but we also don't want total permissiveness either. We want respect, admiration, support, and love. Those are the things that a child deserves. And if parents can't give their child that, they shouldn't be parents. Period. And I don't know why this doesn't get talked about more often from this direction or from this angle. We live in this society where it's just assumed that if you can get somebody pregnant, you deserve to be a parent. It's completely nonsense. Not everybody should be a parent. And not everybody who has kids deserves to be parents to those kids. Sorry, but that's just kind of how it is, right? I mean, we see this over and over and over again. You see it in the news on an almost daily basis. Abusive parents, negligent parents, absent parents. This is so common that we can't imagine a world where it doesn't happen. And I think that's so sad. I think that is so sad. And a lot of this comes from this religious nonsense that, you know, every sperm is sacred and every child must be, you know, that comes into fetushood, every child that comes along, well, they're a miracle of life and God, and they must be taken to term. And then what? Oh, I don't care. It just must be born, see? And then, okay, well, what happens after they're born? I don't care. That's the parent's responsibility. And you're like, okay, I don't think you really understand anything about life or child rearing or people. But, you do you. So anyway, I think I'm probably ranting more than answering here. But in terms of, what do I think about this problem? I think that this is a big problem. And I think it comes from parents who mostly don't want to be parents. That's why I'm kind of focusing on that as the theme of my answer here, is because negligent, abusive parents are a dime a dozen out there. There are so many of them that it becomes a norm, and it shouldn't be that way. So I think that's one problem. I don't think that's the only problem here, or the only reason why we have issues with parents being too soft. I mean, you also do have parents who are too soft. You got the other end of the spectrum too. You do have permissive parenting, negligent parenting, absent parents, parents who just aren't there for their kids, aren't giving them any direction or guidance or support. And that's bad too. We don't want kids growing up thinking that the world is, whatever, that they can just do whatever in society and in life, and it's no big deal and there are no consequences. You got to teach kids about consequences, cause, effect, things like that, right? Anyway, this is sort of my general approach to this. I don't know if it's useful at all, but you asked, so I'm sharing my opinions about it. And there you go. Okay, let's do some flash answers. Shimoda Tala. Peanut butter, smooth or crunchy? Or are you one of those monsters who doesn't like peanut butter? Just kidding. Oh, peanut butter. No, I love peanut butter. And I'd have to say it depends on the context, really. It depends on the use of the peanut butter. But in general, I'm going to go with chunky over smooth. Wheeljack457. Can the Sea Org supplement their income with Social Security or other state or federal government funding? Would that even be allowed? Yes, Sea Org members do contribute to Social Security. It's the FICA percentages are taken out of their pay every week, and they do get Social Security payments when they come of age and are eligible for that. Dr. Robert Tobias. If someone just exiting the Sea Org or any other high control group or cult asked you for a book recommendation to help in the initial decompression and healing process, what would you suggest? Thanks for asking this, Robert. Hands down, consistently, ever since I left Scientology, my answer to this has been Carl Sagan's A Demon-Haunted World. That is, as far as I'm concerned, the single best manual of critical thinking and skepticism that exists. And I highly recommend everyone read it. But I really push it hard on people who have left cults or destructive high control situations. Because the book gives you a way of detecting bullshit. There's an entire chapter called the Baloney Detection Kit, and it gives you step by step or point by point a series of guiding principles you can use in your life to avoid bullshit. And I hit on that right after I got out of Scientology, and it was just life-saving for me. And I've so far, every time I've recommended it to other people, they were incredibly thankful after they read it because they thought it was one of the best things ever. So there you go. All right. That was our show for this week, rants and all. I hope you guys enjoyed the show and what I put out here for you, and that my answers were entertaining, informative, and educational. I will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.